Tarek el-Tayeb. Mohamed Bouazizi was a Tunisian street vendor who set himself on fire on 17 December 2010, in protest of the confiscation of his wares and the harassment and humiliation that he reported was inflicted on him by a municipal official and his aides. His act became a catalyst for the Tunisian Revolution and the wider Arab Spring, inciting demonstrations and riots throughout Tunisia in protest of social and political issues in the country. The public's anger and violence intensified following Bouazizi's death, leading then-President Zine el-Abidine Ben Ali to step down on 14 January 2011, after 23 years in power. The success of the Tunisian protests inspired protests in several other Arab countries, plus several non-Arab countries. The protests included several men who emulated Bouazizi's act of self-immolation in an attempt to bring an end to their own autocratic governments. Those men and Bouazizi were hailed by Arab commentators as heroic martyrs of a new Middle Eastern revolution. In 2011, Bouazizi was posthumously awarded the Sakharov Prize jointly along with 4 others for his and their contributions to historic changes in the Arab world. The Tunisian government honored him with a postage stamp. The Times of the United Kingdom named Bouazizi as Person of 2011. Early life and employment struggles. Mohamed Bouazizi, who was known locally as Boussa, was born in Sidi Bouzid, Tunisia, on 29 March 1984. His father, a construction worker in Libya, died of a heart attack when Bouazizi was 3, and his mother married Bouazizi's uncle some time later. Along with his 6 siblings, Bouazizi was educated in a one-room country school in Sidi Salah, a small village 12 miles from Sidi Bouzid. Although several media outlets reported that Bouazizi had a university degree, his sister, Samia Bouazizi, stated that he had never graduated from high school, but that it was something he had wanted for both himself and his sisters. With his uncle in poor health and unable to work regularly, Bouazizi had worked various jobs since he was 10, and in his late teens he quit school in order to work full-time. Bouazizi lived in a modest stucco home, a 20-minute walk from the center of Sidi Bouzid, a rural town in Tunisia burdened by corruption and suffering an unemployment rate estimated at 30%. According to his mother, he applied to join the army, but was refused, and several subsequent job applications also resulted in rejection. He supported his mother, uncle, and younger siblings, including paying for one of his sisters to attend university, by earning approximately $140 per month selling produce on the street in Sidi Bouzid. He was also working toward the goal of buying or renting a pickup truck for his work. A close friend of Bouazizi said he was a very well-known and popular man, would give free fruit and vegetables to very poor families. Confiscation of wares and self-immolation. According to friends and family, local police officers had allegedly targeted and mistreated Bouazizi for years, including during his childhood, regularly confiscating his small wheelbarrow of produce, but Bouazizi had no other way to make a living, so he continued to work as a street vendor. Around 10 p.m. on 16 December 2010, he had contracted approximately $200 in debt to buy the produce he was to sell the following day. On the morning of 17 December, he started his workday at 8 a.m. Just after 10:30 a.m., the police began harassing him again, ostensibly because he did not have a vendor's permit. However, while some sources state that street vending is illegal in Tunisia, and others that Bouazizi lacked a required permit to sell his wares, according to the head of el-Tayeb State Office for Employment and Independent Work, no permit is needed to sell from a car. Unfortunately, Bouazizi did not have the funds to bribe police officials to allow his street vending to continue. Similarly, two of Bouazizi's siblings accused authorities of attempting to extort money from the brother, and during an interview with Reuters, one of his sisters stated, "What kind of repression do you imagine it takes for a young man to do this? A man who has to feed his family by buying goods on credit when they fine him. And take his goods. In el-Tayeb, those with no connections and no money for bribes are humiliated and insulted and not allowed to live." Bouazizi's family claims he was publicly humiliated, that a 45-year-old female municipal official, aides, slapped him in the face, spat at him, confiscated his electronic weighing scales, and tossed aside his produce cart. It was also stated that she made a slur against his deceased father. Bouazizi's family says her sex made his humiliation worse. aides and her brother claimed in interviews that she did not slap Bouazizi or otherwise mistreat him. An eyewitness referred to by al-Sat claimed not to have seen Hamdi slap Bouazizi. Both Bouazizi's mother and the eyewitness who spoke with al-Sat stated that Hamdi's aides had kicked and beaten him after confiscating his fruit cart. Hamdi states it might have happened and al-Sat denies it did. Bouazizi, angered by the confrontation, went to the governor's office to complain and to ask for his scales back. The governor refused to see or listen to him, even after Bouazizi was quoted as saying, "If you don't see me, I'll burn myself." Bouazizi then acquired a can of gasoline from a nearby gas station and returned to the governor's office. While standing in the middle of traffic, he shouted, "How do you expect me to make a living?" He then doused himself with the gasoline and set himself alight with a match at 11:30 a.m. local time, less than an hour after the altercation, death and funeral. According to Bouazizi's sister, whose information was based on details relayed from her uncle who was present at the scene, people immediately panicked when he caught fire, and one of them tried to douse him with water, which only worsened his condition. Bouazizi had suffered severe burns on over 90% of his body before locals managed to stop the flames. He was taken by ambulance to a medical facility in el-Tayeb. When they were unable to treat his severe burns, he was taken to a larger hospital in Sfax, more than 70 miles away. Later, as the government's interest in his case grew, he was transferred to a burn and trauma center in Benares, where he was placed in an intensive care unit. On the 31st of December 2010, doctors at the Benares Burn and Trauma Center reported that Bouazizi was in stable condition, and that he was showing a positive possibility of recovery. Despite the optimistic prognosis, however, Bouazizi remained comatose until his death. Bouazizi was visited in the hospital by then-President Zine el-Abidine Ben Ali. According to Bouazizi's mother, Ben Ali promised to send him to France for medical treatment, but no such transfer was ever arranged. Bouazizi died at the Benares Burn and Trauma Center 18 days after the immolation on the 4th of January 2011 at 5:30 p.m. local time. It is estimated that more than 5,000 people participated in the funeral procession that began in el-Tayeb and continued through to Bouazizi's native village, though police did not allow the procession to pass near the spot at which Bouazizi had burned himself. For the crowd, many were heard chanting, "Farewell, Mohammed, we will avenge you. We weep for you today. We will make those who caused your death weep." He was buried at Garat Ben Or Cemetery, 10 miles from Sidi Bouzid. His grave was described by Al Jazeera as simple and surrounded by cactuses, olive, and almond trees. In addition, a Tunisian flag flies next to the site. Tom Cheshire also describes his tomb after visiting it: small, white by a row of cacti, and with a simple inscription, Martyr Mohamed Bouazizi. Peace for his life, and in the next life, have peace as well. An investigation was launched following Bouazizi's self-immolation to find the details leading up to his actions. On the 20th of December 2010, it was reported that Faida Hamdi, the female officer who allegedly accosted Bouazizi the day of his immolation, was suspended along with the Secretary General of Sidi Bouzid, but this was subsequently denied by the latter. Sometime later, Hamdi was arrested on orders from President Ben Ali and held in an unspecified town. A brother of Hamdi later stated that she had been arrested and detained twice, the first time following Ben Ali's visit to Bouazizi in the hospital and subsequent meeting with his mother and sister at his presidential palace. He says his sister and her aides were released following a short detention and the closing of the investigation, which confirmed her innocence. Quote, he said her second arrest was in response to the demands of the Tunisian protesters, and that the Tunisian security authorities informed him that she was being held only for her own protection and would be released once the protesting ended. According to Bouazizi's mother, Bouazizi undertook his action because he had been humiliated, not because of the family's poverty. It got to him deep inside, it hurt his pride, she said, referring to the police harassment. One of Bouazizi's sisters stated during an interview with Ashaq al-Awsat that the family intends to take legal action against all involved. Whether this is the municipal officers that slapped and insulted him, or the mayor refused to meet him. On the 19th of April, the case against Hamdi was dropped after Bouazizi's mother withdrew the family's complaint against her. She stated, "It was a difficult but well thought out decision to avoid hatred and help reconcile the residents of Sidi Bouzid." Hamdi had maintained her innocence, telling the court she did not slap Bouazizi, while her lawyer said the matter was purely a political affair. Bouazizi's brother Salem supported the decision, saying, "All the money in the world can't replace the loss of Mohammed, who sacrificed himself for freedom and for dignity." Large crowds of people outside the courtroom also appeared to have been satisfied by the Bouazizi family's decision, with some claiming Hamdi was being used as a scapegoat. Protests outraged by the events that led to Bouazizi's self-immolation. Protests began in Sidi Bouzid within hours, building for more than 2 weeks, with attempts by police to quiet the unrest serving only to fuel what was quickly becoming a violent and deadly movement. After Bouazizi's death, the protests became widespread, moving into the more affluent areas and eventually into the capital. The anger and violence became so intense that President Ben Ali fled Tunisia with his family on the 14th of January 2011, trying first to go to Paris, but was refused refuge by the French government. They were eventually welcomed into Saudi Arabia under a long list of conditions, ending his 23-year rule and sparking angry condemnation among Saudis. In Tunisia, unrest persisted as a new regime took over, leaving many citizens of Tunisia feeling as though their needs were still being ignored. Aftermath and legacy. Many Arabs in the Middle East and North Africa regard Bouazizi as a hero and inspiration. He is credited with galvanizing the frustrations of the region's youth against the governments into the mass demonstrations, revolts, and revolutions that have become known as the Arab Spring. 1 year on, Tunisian writer and academic Labi Sadiki asserted that Bouazizi's self-immolation changed the course of Arab political history, achieving the breakthrough in the fight against autocracy. Quote, However, he also wrote it would take years before the act and the subsequent chain of events that followed were profoundly grasped by historians and social scientists. Bouazizi is considered a martyr by the Progressive Democratic Party of Tunisia. Tunisian film director Mohamed Bouazizi plans on making a feature film about Bouazizi, describing him as a symbol for eternity. Tarek Ben Ahmad, also a Tunisian film director, intends to make a film on Bouazizi as well, stating he is a hero for us as Tunisians and the Arab world as a whole. Since suicide is forbidden in Islam, Bouazizi's self-immolation created controversy among scholarly Muslim circles. While Al-Azhar University, the most prestigious religious institution in the Sunni Muslim world, issued a fatwa stating suicide violates Islam even when it is carried out as a social or political protest. Influential Egyptian cleric Yusuf al-Qaradawi spoke sympathetically of Bouazizi. On the 4th of February 2011, Bertrand Delano, the mayor of Paris, announced that, as a tribute to honor Bouazizi, a square in Paris will be named after him. The place Mohamed Bouazizi was unveiled 4 days later. On the 17th of February, the main square in Tunis that was previously called November 7th after the date of Ben Ali's takeover in 1987, was renamed January 14th, though some had suggested it should honor Bouazizi. Bouazizi was posthumously awarded the 2011 Sakharov Prize as one of 5 representatives of the Arab people, in recognition and support of the drive for freedom and human rights. On the 17th of December, a cart statue was unveiled in Sidi Bouzid in honor of Bouazizi. Tunisia's first elected president Moncef Marzouki attended the ceremony, stating, "Thank you to this land, which has been marginalized for centuries, for bringing dignity to the entire Tunisian people." Also, in Sidi Bouzid, as well as in the capital city of Tunis, both cities' respective main streets were renamed Boulevard Mohamed Bouazizi. The United Kingdom's The Times newspaper named Bouazizi Person of the Year for 2011. By Fire, a story by Moroccan author Taha Benjelloun inspired by this incident, was published in the New Yorker edition of the 16th of September 2013. A fictional treatment. Some details in the story differ from the factual account. An interview with the author about his story was posted to the New Yorker's This Week in Fiction on the 9th of September 2013. On the 17th of December 2015, the Tunisian National Dialogue Quartet, the Nobel Peace Prize laureates of that year, as well as other civil society organizations, celebrated Mohamed Bouazizi and the start of the Arab Spring 5 years after his death in a ceremony in Sidi Bouzid. Copycat incidents. Bouazizi's actions triggered the weather effect, causing a number of self-immolations in protests emulating Bouazizi's in several other countries in the Greater Middle East and Europe. In Algeria in particular, protests against rising food prices and spreading unemployment have resulted in many self-immolations. The first reported case following Bouazizi's death was that of Mohsen Bouteflika, a 37-year-old father of 2, who set himself on fire when the mayor of Boukadra refused to meet with him and others regarding employment and housing requests on the 13th of January. 2011. According to a report in El Watan, the mayor challenged him, saying if he had courage he would immolate himself by fire as Bouazizi had done. He died on the 24th of January. In nearby El Wed province, Mamir Lotfi, a 36-year-old unemployed father of 6, also denied a meeting with the governor, burned himself in front of the town hall of El Wed on the 17th of January, dying on the 12th of February. Abdelhafid Bouchicha, a 29-year-old day laborer who lived with his parents and 5 siblings, burned himself in Medjana on the 28th of January over employment and housing issues. He died the following day. In the 6 months immediately after Mohamed Bouazizi's death on the 4th of January 2011, at least 107 Tunisians tried to kill themselves by setting themselves on fire. The men who self-immolated were mostly young unmarried men from poor, rural areas, and had only basic education. Aminullah Messadi, who collated the figures and is head of the Burns Center, said that people shouldn't glorify the act of self-immolation and should stop adding fuel to the fire. In Israel, Moshe Silman set himself on fire during social justice protests and died on 20 July 2012. In Egypt, Abdulmunaim Jafar, a 49-year-old restaurant owner, set himself alight in front of the Egyptian parliament. His act of protest helped instigate weeks of protest and, later, the resignation of Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak on the 11th of February 2011. In Saudi Arabia, an unidentified 65-year-old man died on 21 January 2011, after setting himself on fire in the town of Samta, Zine. This was apparently the kingdom's first known case of self-immolation, although these cases, with the exception of Egypt, did not provoke the same kind of popular reaction that Bouazizi's case did in Tunisia. The Algerian, Yemeni, and Jordanian governments have experienced significant protests and made major concessions in response to them. As such, these men and Bouazizi were hailed by some as heroic martyrs of a new Middle Eastern revolution. The wave of copycat incidents reached Europe on the 11th of February 2011, in a case very similar to Bouazizi's. Noureddin Adnan, a 27-year-old Moroccan street vendor, set himself on fire in Palermo, Sicily, in protest of the confiscation of his wares and the harassment that was allegedly inflicted on him by municipal officials. He died 5 days later. In Amsterdam, Kambiz Rousteh, a 36-year-old asylum seeker from Iran, set himself on fire on Dam Square in protest of being rejected asylum. Rousteh had fled the country for publishing works undermining the regime, and feared being tortured by the Iranian regime upon his return.